Hey, welcome everybody from wherever you're at around the world. I'd like to thank you for stopping on by. My name is Jeff. I'm a retired Chief Petty Officer with the United States Navy, and I'm in my 28th year now of researching Colonel Fraser's 78th Regiment during the 7 Years' War. A couple housekeeping items before I get started. With today's topic, I have to be careful because I don't want to violate any of YouTube's policies on this particular subject matter. It would be easy with some buzzwords for their algorithms to pick it up. So if you hear me kind of dancing around a little bit, you'll understand why. Secondly, if you're interested in this particular type of topic pertaining to the 7 Years' War, I would encourage you to research a woman named Marie Corriveau, Corriveau, from April 1763 in Quebec. She was put on trial by the British Army. Major James Abercrombie of the 78th Regiment was an officer that presided over that trial, and two Highlander soldiers testified in the trial. I think they were both sergeants, if my memory serves me correctly. I was able to download the trial transcripts through the National Archives in Montreal, BANQ. And I don't know if it's still there. I would give you a link, but I'm sure links change all the time. So there was no sense because the link would probably be 3 or 4 years old by now. So to get started in this, we actually have to go back to Connecticut. Now, the Highlanders, they were not angels, but I've found that their names appear less frequently in the legal manuals. But one of the first instances that we know of, and I do believe this has been published, what involved a sergeant who was put on trial for taking the life of one of his battalion mates. It ended up going to a civilian court in Connecticut. Governor Fitch at the time, he got involved with this, but the sergeant was ultimately acquitted. It was self-defense, I believe, is what they determined. So he was not punished in any way for it. There was another instance where a couple Highlanders beat up a guy. I don't think that's ever been published. Beat up a gentleman named Caleb Mead, Mead. I was never able to find any court dispositions pertaining to that, a trial, anything like that. All I have is an entry saying that the incident happened. So they get out of Connecticut after 6 months there. It's now about the 30th of March. They get on a couple transport ships and they sail up to Providence, Rhode Island. And after everybody was collected in Providence, they march into Boston, Massachusetts, where they ultimately picked up more transports and were sent up to Halifax, Nova Scotia. This would have been right towards the end of April now, April 27th, 28th, somewhere around there. Ultimately, they went on to Louisbourg and then on to Quebec. We all know that. But while in Halifax, something interesting happened. But before we get to that, here is the garrison. And I want to direct your attention to the center of the image down at the bottom near the water's edge. And I know it's difficult if you're on a phone or even a tablet to see this, but it says gallows and then stocks. So this is the area of the fort where the punishment would have taken place. Everybody would have gathered around and had to witness what was going to happen to anybody who was punished. This map here is, it's a facsimile from an actual survey that was done in 1760. There was a gentleman who was a civilian carpenter. His name was Daniel Knapp, Knapp. And I found his journal online through the Library and Archives Canada. And we got lucky because some journal entries cover the specific time when the Highlanders were there. And what stood out to me was on Sunday, 14 May, 1758, so this is about 2 weeks after they arrived there, Knapp wrote, quote, "Was at work. At home, there was a Highland minister who preached. We all went to hear the sermon. The sermon, unquote, the sermon that the parson gave involved Matthew 5, verse 29. And if you're not familiar with that, that deals, in a nutshell, it deals with adultery. Now, the very next day, on May 15th, there's another entry that Knapp put in his journal, which says, quote, "Was to work in the wood. Afternoon, there was a Highlander, whipped 500 strokes, we'll say," unquote. So I had to think back to the day before when the parson gave his sermon. And was he sending a message to the rest of the soldiers there based on what was going to happen the next day? Because obviously the parson would have been in on it, being an officer. I think everybody probably knew that the punishment was coming because word travels fast. Now, whether the Highlander soldier who found trouble on the 15th was involved in adultery, we don't know. If it was, my personal thoughts are it may have been something that stemmed from the time they were in Connecticut for 6 months. Because it was during the wintertime and they were billeted among the civilian homes while they were there. It was generally 2, 3, sometimes 4 soldiers to a house. And when you've got 1,000 soldiers, obviously you're covering, 300 houses or so, plus the officers and whatnot. But I can't prove that. It's a possibility that that's what about. It's possible it was about something totally different. But to get awarded 500, it was probably something severe enough to warrant that. I've seen, I've read, I've heard, I think, I'm not sure which one. Maybe saw it in a movie. It's maybe in one of my digital files somewhere. But something's in the back of my mind that there were times when the sentenced soldier was forced to manufacture the instrument that would be used against him. I can't prove it. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. Maybe you've heard it or you saw it. And if you have, please let everybody know. So I don't have to go through all my files and try to dig, but I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere or saw it in a movie. Who knows? So the 15th, the entire garrison would have been brought on out and business would have been taken care of. Now, I've also read that sometimes if somebody was awarded, let's say 500, that number would be reduced, maybe down to 100, by awarding the sentence at the maximum number that fell in the guidelines of what the military had authorized for specific punishments. But, based on the soldier, based on, his soldier-like behavior, his work ethic, certainly the commanding officers or even general, whoever was in charge at the time, could offer some type of a reprieve. Personally, I think if you were to receive 500 in one sitting, I think that might have a great effect on your life as a whole. I don't know. Military's changed from when I served, so we don't do this anymore, thank God. So after The 70th Regiment participated in Louisburg, and they got up to Quebec. They did their business on the Plains of Abraham on 13 September 1759. There was business that was kind of backed up and business that needed to be taken care of. So after the British had got the keys to the city and they set up shop, so to speak, they had to handle some incidences. This first incident involved soldier Thomas Cram. We don't know if he was a private, corporal, sergeant. We don't know. Doesn't say. He was out of the 48th Regiment. He was found guilty of plundering a French house. And basically, plundering meant theft. He was in there. Maybe he was stealing food or clothing or maybe even personal belongings. Bottom line was he stole for his own personal gain, and that was not going to be tolerated, and it was dealt with swiftly. And of course, you see his sentence where he received 200, so to speak. The next incident that I found in Quebec, now this is, 1759. This involved Matthew Peasley, a soldier out of the 3rd Battalion, the 60th Royal American Regiment. He was found guilty. He didn't actually desert, but he was found guilty of an intention to do so, of having formed the plan to leave the army. Now, whether another soldier ratted on him or whether he was overheard discussing his intentions, the record's not clear. But what we do know is that the court found the evidence sufficient to convict him. And, of course, you see his sentence. They probably went a little bit light on him because he hadn't actually deserted, is my thoughts. Next, we have these two gentlemen, Matthew Kerrigan and John MacDonald, again of the 3rd Battalion, 60th Royal American Regiment. So they were battalion mates to Matthew Peasley. And these two men were found guilty of stealing the king's wine. The grog, so to speak. So in a military environment, where, supplies were carefully controlled and accounted for, the taking of provisions without authorization, it was really, if you think about it, more than a simple act of theft. It was a breach of military discipline is what it was. Because stuff like this, the wine and the foods, those were meant for everybody. So the court-martial, in my opinion, treated this offense with extraordinary severity, if you will, sentencing both men to receive 1,000. It was a pretty big deal. I have read in officers' journals a lot of warning time after time again, anybody caught taking the king's wine or the king's stores, you're going to be dealt with. And even the women, if the women got caught, they were drummed out of the regiment on the spot. For those of you that didn't know, there were women that traveled along with regiments. Generally, they were wives. And there was also children as well too. And the wives, they did garrison duty, cleaning, and they helped with cooking and the sewing and nursing, things like that. Next, we have Robert Taylor of the 35th Regiment. Interestingly, earlier in, I believe it was early 1758, Colonel Fraser had to give up 100 of his men had to go to the 35th Regiment. So a lottery was done because the 35th Regiment had suffered severe losses. And Colonel Fraser was ordered to replenish because Fraser had at this point, some 1,400 men. So he could afford to give up 100 or so. Whether Taylor was originally a Highlander, we don't know because we haven't found the list of the men that actually transferred. But this soldier, he was to suffer his life for taking the life of John Rigdon. We don't know if Rigdon was also in the 35th Regiment, being a battalion mate of Taylor, or whether Rigdon was in the 78th, or we just don't know. We don't know who he belonged to because the record's not clear. But ultimately, for the time being, the general reprieved him until His Majesty's pleasure is known, which meant that word had to be sent back to England. And I'm assuming that anything dealt with the taking of a life had to be blessed by the king. So it would take, anywhere 40 days, maybe 60 days for a letter to get back to England. And it may have had to been done quickly, because if all this took place in October, you're starting to get close to the winter freeze up in Canada, and I don't know exactly when the ports would have shut down until spring. So let's say that a letter got out right away in, mid to late October. Then by the time it got to England, it would be another couple months on top of that because of the winter freeze before they would get word. They might have gotten word till September. So Taylor here, he may have had a pretty bad life for the next 6 to 8 months until word came back from the king. It's my thoughts that the king was probably going to go along with what the field generals were telling him. There was no reason for the king not to, since they had eyes on what was happening. And finally, the last one we have here today is Terence Martin of the 2nd Battalion of the 60th Royal American Regiment. So the boys in the Royal American Regiment, the 2nd and 3rd Battalion, they were getting kind of froggy once the battles were all over. But in this case, it wasn't all doom and gloom, because Martin here, he's acquitted of the charge that was laid against him. And unfortunately, I apologize, because the record does not show what charge was laid against him. And he was ordered released. So he was having a good day, a good week, and a good month. Oh, there was one more. I'm sorry. John Ledbetter, 35th Regiment. He was found guilty of desertion. So unlike Matthew Peasley, who was found of an intent to desert and was awarded 500, this gentleman actually did desert, and he got twice the punishment. Today's military, when I served 1993 through 2023, but my active duty went to 2013. But if you deserted when I was in, and probably even in the military today, they don't even go looking for you. It used to be back in the day that, that they would send a team out, go to your hometown, all your known contacts, and look for you. But today, they don't even look for you. They just wait because you're going to get picked up at some point. You're going to get a speeding ticket. You're going to get pulled over for something stupid, a broken taillight at some point. You're going to go and try to get a driver's license renewed, and it's all going to be on that record. So it's just a matter of time. But they still do punishments like bread and water for 3 days, things like that. Mostly though, the way they kind of hurt you, so to speak, and not in the physical sense in today's U.S. military, is they get into your pocketbook. And it's usually they'll take like a half a month's pay for, 2 months. And if you're a young soldier, young airman, young sailor or coastie, and you're newly married, you're in your, 22, 23, you're not making a lot of money, you've got a young wife and a child at home, and you get into somebody's pocketbook with a half a month's pay, that can really hurt a family. So just a little FYI from my time in the military. So that kind of finishes it up with today's video. I hope you enjoy the topic. I hope you enjoyed reviewing some of the soldiers. If this is something that you would like to see more of, I do have some more actual court trials for gentlemen in the 78th Regiment that found some troubles, and we can go through the actual court trials itself. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions about the topic. Let me know if you have a soldier in the 78th Regiment, where they were from, who they were, where they were from, where family lore suggests they were from, anything you can think of that you would like to share. I'd like to thank everybody for stopping on by today. Again, my name is Jeff, and we'll see you next time. Take care.